Today, 3rd of April 2016, as we celebrate God's faithfulness to our ministry in the past 27 years, we are also mindful of the state of the nation, whose great destiny is up till now hanging in the balance, and very precariously so. At the beginning of the year 2016, we alerted the nation that the year will be a year of global upheavals, characterized by extreme uncertainties, intense political suspense, accelerated global terror, and mounting economic pressure due to dwindling resources that will drive nations to the precipice and activate the rage of the poor. Today, our country is squarely in the midst of the predicted socio-economic and political quagmire, warranting a re-examination of the configuration of our nationhood and a reassessment of the framework of state. The time has come once again to ask ourselves whether our nation is appropriately configured to survive the current and coming upheavals, talk less of fulfilling a great destiny. However, in carrying out this assessment, I do not want you to be ignorant of the source of the onslaught against our nation or the true enemy, the true nature of the enemy we are up against. Failure to understand this will only result in the application of cosmetic solutions to deep-rooted national issues. Like the landmark encounters of the nation of Israel with Philistine giants, the Nigerian nation has been under the simultaneous barrage of 5 giants of national domination whose mandate is to ensure that Nigeria goes into extinction, or even if she remains a nation, that she succeeds far below her potential, head bowed, as a victim of arrested development. These giants are symbolized by number 1, Goliath of God, the champion of terror and violence, which produces fear, internal displacement, and exile. Number 2, Isbi Benob, meaning respiration, an adversary that seeks to cut off the breath of life and produce corruption which asphyxiates national development plans and policies. Number 3, Lami, Goliath's brother, whose name means full of food, my bread or my war, representing excessive consumption and the forceful commercialization of our national patrimony by a few cronies of the powerful oligopolies. Number 4, Sipai, which means threshold or silver cup, whose mandate is to ensure that a cup of injustice is delivered at the city gates where judgment and justice ought to be dispensed. And number 5, the man of great stature, who had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, symbolic of deviation from norms, disregard for boundaries, and lawlessness. The operations of these giants over the years have brought our nation to our knees, engendering calls for national deliverance. In the past 27 years of our ministry, we have accepted the mandate for the emergence of the new Nigeria, and we have strategically intervened from the pulpit to the podium. By the mercy and grace of God, we have prayed, we have preached, we have prophesied, we have marched the streets. We have convened dialogues of the nobles. We have counseled leaders at all levels and in all arms of government, including presidents, governors, local government chairpersons, members of the national, state, and local legislatures, as well as magistrates and justices of the courts. Moreover, we have jumped into the fray, campaigning for genuine change in response to the call to serve. We have heard sons, daughters, and friends of our ministry positioned in critical areas of responsibility. Furthermore, We have conferred with compatriots in the quest for a more perfect union. We have given the nation timely warnings, offered alternative pathways to national progress, interceded even when our warnings were scoffed at, and we have mediated between parties to guarantee peaceful transition. Like David, when he rose to challenge the champion of God who defied the armies of Israel, we have often been misunderstood and criticized by foes, friends, and even brothers. But also like David on this occasion of our 27th anniversary, we ask, is there not a cause? The theme of this presentation is championing the cause for a new Nigeria. Say that with me. I can hear you. You don't say it like you mean it. Championing the cause of a new Nigeria. Now let's examine the calls for a new Nigeria. It's not something we are just starting today. The following declaration, which perhaps was the first ever official reference to the subject of a new Nigeria, was made by General Yakubu Gowon in his 1967 Independence Day speech when Nigeria was in the throes of civil war. Seeking to discourage ethnic sentiments and promote national unity, the then head of state said, "Fellow Nigerians, we are now on the threshold of a new Nigeria. Past attitude of mind, dominated by the tribal approach to the solution of our problems, we have no place in the new Nigeria." Decades later, upon Nigerians' return to civil rule, following years of military dictatorship, and during his visit to Nigeria as President of the United States of America, Bill Clinton, in his August 26, 2000, address to a joint session of the Nigerian National Assembly said, "Now, at the dawn of a new century, the road is open at home to all citizens of Nigeria. You have the chance to build a new Nigeria." On October 1, 2005, on the occasion of Nigeria's 45th independence anniversary, former Nigerian President Chief Olusegun Obasanjo indicated the new Nigeria posture of his administration when he said, "Today, we have zero tolerance for waste, corruption, indolence, and social rascality. This is the only way to lay the foundation for a new Nigeria as a country with a new image, new focus, new determination, new values, and new purpose." Months after the 2015 elections that led to the emergence of the current administration, and on the occasion of our visit to Nigeria in January 2016, the president of the International Monetary Fund, IMF, Christine Lagarde, made allusions to Nigeria's commitment to a new nation. In our words, we saw a peaceful general election last year in which for the first time in Nigeria's history, there was a democratic transition between two civilian governments. It was a strong sign of Nigeria's commitment to democracy, to a new Nigeria. Indeed, the current administration rose to power on the promise of a new Nigeria. Ahead of the elections, this promise was made by the All Progressive Congress as well as the party's flag bearer. While canvassing support from party delegates, General Muhammadu Buhari, retired, as he then was addressed, articulated this position in his opening address at the party's convention in December 2014. In the words of the then aspirant, "We seek a new Nigeria. It starts with us. It starts today. I've placed myself before you seeking your help to nominate me as your standard bearer for our progressive party, APC." Reiterating this position and his selfless motivation, the would-be candidate further quizzed, "Why then do I seek office, if not for myself, while others might prefer to stay at home, watching their grandchildren grow and leave the battle to others I still see injustices that need to be righted, and I still dream of a new Nigeria. Am I boring you? Upon his nomination as the presidential candidate of the APC, General Buhari made it unequivocally clear that the new Nigeria ideal was the ethos of his party and the government he sought to form. In his words, just as APC stands as a new party for a new Nigeria, our government will institute new policies to realize the new Nigeria. Concluding his acceptance speech, the candidate charged the nation with the following inspiring and touching words. I pledge to do my utmost to make this happen, but cannot do it alone. I need your support, he said. I need your help to become president of Nigeria so that government may come to serve you, so that it may bring relief to the broken and weary among us, and so that it may usher in a new Nigeria meant for us all, a Nigeria that is the birthright of everyone, but the exclusive possession of no one. 3 schools of thought in the call for a new Nigeria. We must separate the chaff from the grain. While there appears to be a consensus on the need for a new Nigeria and on the broad characteristics of a new nation, including an anti-corruption culture and socio-economic development, there is, however, some divergence as to specific parameters or indicators of the new. In this regard, at least 3 broad schools of thought may be identified, and I like to label them. Number 1, the conservative. Number 2, the reformative. And number 3, the revolutionary. Say that with me: conservative, reformative, and the revolutionary. Let's begin with the conservative. What is their thought pattern? The conservative school of thought opines that the state of the nation, however dismal at the point of analysis, represents the desire or much talk about new Nigeria merely because of political changes such as the return to civil rule in 1999. This view is mostly held by politicians and their cronies upon obtaining or retaining power. It's also held by some political appointees who, upon launching certain policy initiatives, equate the mere introduction of such policies to the emergence of a new era, notwithstanding the effectiveness or otherwise of such policies or even the unintended consequences. This explains the perspectives of some of our past and current leaders. In line with this school of thought, and in what appears to be an incurable disease, incurable case of political blind spot disease, every subsisting administration is quick to lay claim to ushering in a new national era. It is why the spearheads of every coup d'etat during the military era came with a promise to right the wrongs of the ousted government, even when it was on the path to creating more problems than its predecessor. It is why, at the return to civil rule, Chief Obasanjo laid claim to laying the foundation for a new Nigeria, which is a claim, zero tolerance for waste, corruption, indolence, and social rascality, despite pointers to the contrary. It is why the Goodluck administration prided itself in the transformation agenda, even when the majority of Nigerians could not identify significant signs of transformation as evident in the outcome of the 2015 election. Perhaps it's also why the current APC government claims to be the embodiment of change Nigeria needs, a claim increasingly questioned by the Nigerian people. Compounding this political ocular dysfunction is a disease that one may diagnose as socio-political economic amnesia, when stale men pretending to be statesmen seek to retain relevance as self-proclaimed founders of modern Nigeria. They manifest the symptoms of this disease when they become self-appointed advisors of succeeding governments on how to manage the same problems they created and handed down. This conservative view is often shared by those I call the corporate cowboys who bankroll political escapades and who, in order to secure economic interests, desperately fight for continuity in the political economic climate. The conservative perspective is further echoed by palace prophets who anoint political jobbers and pitch their tents around the corridors of power in search of contracts, waivers, licenses, and soft landings. The second school of thought, the reformative school of thought, holds the view that whereas previous governments had institutionalized misgovernance, change of government provides an opportunity to create a new nation through the replacement of old attitudes with new ones and through the introduction of reforms in institutions, policies, and investments. This explains the renewed interest in Nigeria by the international community upon the emergence of a new government, particularly after an era of international alienation. This view is also held by forward-looking holders of public office seeking to optimize public service delivery in spite of the fundamental impediments to good governance. In most cases, however, this school of thought is often skeptical of sweeping fundamental changes and is more reformative than revolutionary. Shall I continue? The third school of thought. Conversely, the third school of thought is a revolutionary and challenges the new Nigeria claims of the status quo. Tell your neighbor, there's no status. I can hear there's no status in status quo. Amidst the public euphoria over recent political and policy developments, this school holds on to the expectation of the emergence of a new nation that contends that the fundamental factors necessary to guarantee the promise of new nationhood have been lacking even since the return to civil rule in 1999. In this address, while appreciating the positive developments in our democratic experience, especially the attempts by past and current governments to eliminate systemic leakages, I shall seek to prove that by fair preponderance of credible evidence, the state of the nation calls for a revolution that transcends politics or policies, a revolution that means far more than any change of government, a revolution that means a radical reformation of values as an impact upon the social, economic, and political landscapes of our nation. The Nigerian problem and the pathway to a new Nigeria, different perspectives. The conservative, reformative, and revolutionary schools of thought tend to consider the Nigerian problem and the required solutions from broadly different perspectives. I term these perspectives the 5 hypotheses on the path to new Nigeria. I'm calling them 5 because there are 5 lords of the Philistines, there are 5 giants of the Philistines, there are 5 kings of the Amorites. 5 hypotheses. Hypothesis number 1. The current problems of the nation are due to global economic cycles which are outside domestic control and will reverse in due course. How many of you have heard that before? Now we are not alone in this matter. What is happening to us is happening to other nations. Just listen. This assumption is hinged on the notion that local economies are not immune from global economic vicissitudes. However, historical evidence shows that by plugging regulatory leakages with a 2-pronged valve of integrity and skill, countries can ensure that their economies wade through unfavorable cycles unscathed or with minimal loss. This explains why, for instance, Singapore stood resilient in the last decade of the 20th century while the other Asian tigers were deep in economic crisis. It explains why countries like Australia withstood the 2008 global financial crisis while other developed economies battle with recession. It explains why the United Arab Emirates boasts a sovereign wealth fund worth $1.2 trillion, while Nigeria, a fellow oil producer, producing much more than UAE, is scraping the bottom of our foreign reserves. And sometimes we don't produce as much as they produce. Other times we produce more than they produce because Dubai has no oil right now. It's Abu Dhabi that has oil. It's a symptom of chronic national laziness to blame the global economic downturn for Nigeria's economic woes, or to wait expectantly for a rise in crude oil prices in order to sustain our consumptive economic patterns. Our problems are not the result of global economic cycles. Our problems are the result of counterproductive national paradigms and self-limiting frameworks of state. Hypothesis number 2. The state of the nation is an unfolding transformational process and requires patience. When Nigeria returned to civil rule in 1999, the conservatives attributed our national problems to the nascent state of our democracy. 16 years down the line, our democracy is still the so-called nascent state. In the so-called nascent state, elections have remained a great source of anxiety for Nigerians due to the associated tension and violence that reveal how divided we still are as a nation. Meanwhile, the hydra-headed monster of corruption appears to have grown yet more heads, with hundreds of thousands of ghost workers hunting our civil service. In the absence of standard handover procedures, government has failed to function as a continuum. Where is Vision 2020 today? Where is the 7-point agenda? Where is the transformation agenda? If bold decisions are not taken at this time to do the right things, not just to do things right, few years from now, we may find ourselves asking, where is the change agenda? Brothers and sisters, fellow Nigerians, I submit to you that the state of the nation is not merely a phase in a transformational or evolutionary process. In fact, the process has hardly begun. Not yet. What we have is an opportunity to begin the process, to lay a new foundation, and to build upon that foundation using a pool of resources that include selected materials from the unsustained successes of previous administrations. Hypothesis number 3. The state of the nation is merely symptomatic, requiring curative policy initiatives. Between May 1999 and March 2007, Nigeria's external reserves compounded from $4.98 billion to $59.37 billion. Aside opportunistic factors such as the oil windfall, these results were the outcome of astute economic management by an economic team comprised of the likes of Dr. Gozi Okojo-Iweala, Dr. Obi Ezekwesili, Dr. Charles Chukwuma Soludo, and Malam Nasir El-Rufai, among others. That economic team was arguably the most competent ever assembled by any government in Nigeria's history to date. Credit must be given to Chief Olusegun Obasanjo for assembling that team. Armed with the National Economic Empowerment and Development Strategy the labor needs, the economic team began to re-engineer Nigeria's macroeconomic landscape. However, side by side, the macroeconomic successes and rapid economic growth was a dismal microeconomic and human development performance that saw over 84 million Nigerians living below the poverty line, aside other woeful indicators even at that time. Today, due to the negative global economic environment, the prospects look much bleaker. If mere policy initiatives without foundational and structural changes could not deliver the promise of a new Nigeria when the global and local economic climates were favorable, why do we think that they will at this time when the wells have almost run dry? I'm reminded of the biblical parable of the green and dry trees. Jesus said in Luke 23:31, "For if people do these things when the tree is green, what will happen when it is dry?" Hypothesis number 4. The national challenges are systemic, requiring reformative interventions such as institutional reforms and constitutional amendments. This assumption is based on the recognition that policy and investment intervention in governance are insufficient in dealing with the Nigerian problem. It recognizes the role of leadership in institution building based on the rule of law. However, it argues that the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999, as amended, suffices as the basis on which the rule of law can be guaranteed. This position assumes that barring the need for few amendments which can be effected as the democratic process evolves, there's nothing essentially wrong with the Constitution, and that the problem is largely with the operators of the document and the bureaucratic systems by which they operate. Have you heard that before? While I cannot fault certain aspects of this assumption, although assumption is the lowest level of knowledge, I must nevertheless ask few questions. Why have almost all our attempts at institution building fallen like a pack of cards upon the exit of the spearhead, whether or not succession plans were put in place? Why has our budget office metamorphosed from an office of due process to an office of budget padding? What has become of the Bureau of Public Enterprise with its questionable transfer of PHCN assets to Gencos and Discos? I think they are dancing disco. To Gencos and Discos that lack financial and technical capacity. How did EFCC become a toothless bulldog? Worse still, why did the Obasanjo administration bequeath to us a legacy of lame and limping successor government? Have the subsequent amendments of the 1999 Constitution made any significant differences? No. What significant difference have the subsequent amendments to the 1999 Constitution made? I submit to you that the state of our nation calls for more than mere reforms or amendments. Hypothesis number 5. The state of the nation is due to fundamental flaws and requires a complete rebirth of nationhood and a rebuilding of the framework of state. The inadequacy of the 4 assumptions we have so far considered is simply a clear indication that there is something fundamentally wrong with the very essence of our nationhood. This fundamental error in our national configuration has consistently manifested as defects in our framework of state. It's an error in value configuration, the output of which has been structural deformation, institutional degradation, constitutional aberrations, and governmental incapacitation. For Nigeria to overcome our limitations, our nationhood must be reconfigured and the framework of state restructured. We shall now examine this process. Shall I? If you give me a few more minutes, I'll be through. Should we do this? Because many think it's rocket science. It isn't. Shall we? Number 1, value reconfiguration. To understand the error in our current national value system, we must first take a look at the premise upon which the nation was engineered despite the pointers to the destiny of our nation. The colonial masters who became instrumental in the union of the hitherto separate entities that constitute Nigerian nation, the northern and the southern protectorates, had a different agenda. To them, the area around the Niger was a piece of real estate which had been purchased from the Royal Niger Company, RNC, that became UAC. In 1900, the whole nation was purchased for 865,000 pounds, which in today's value is about 825 million pounds, labor and income values inclusive. You did not know that they bought you. This commercial premise for the concept of an amalgamated Nigerian geopolitical entity determined the priorities of the colonial government. Consequently, although the British government established local structures and programs, its concept of Nigeria as an instrument of British imperial interest shaped its policies, which were aimed at serving the British economy as against integrating and developing the border nation. Its divide and rule policy resulted in socioeconomic disparity and distrust, and soon distrust escalated to discord. This misconception of nationhood was transmitted to the generation of our founding fathers when they received the baton of leadership. It soon divided the nation, the noble intentions of these national heroes notwithstanding. Since then, that seed has been transmitted from generation to generation, and some manifestation of value misconfiguration as follows. In Nigeria, we have patronage networks as against patriotism. The moment I get an office, maybe a minister or anything, everybody from my tribe says it's our time. It's our turn. Patronage networks as against patriotism. Number two, spectatorship and sabotage as against stakeholdership. Nigerian citizens are not stakeholders in the affairs of Nigeria, they are spectators. Number three, preservation of national, narrow sectional interests as against pursuit of sublime national interests. Igbos are marginalized. Yorubas are marginalized. It depends on who is in power. Number four, emphasis of consumption and commerce as against capacity building for productivity. Number five, devouring as against discovery. We all want to eat the national cake, nobody wants to bake. Number six, imitation as against innovation. We have Peugeot assembly, Volkswagen assembly, but they are completely knocked down vehicles that we couple together when other nations are manufacturing their own. Imitation as against innovation. We believe in a lie called transfer of technology, and nothing has been transferred to us, not even the formula for Coca-Cola. Number seven, mediocrity as against meritoriousness. Anyone that has the money can climb into power. And those who will not protest or who will not participate must be ready to endure the rule of idiots. Number eight, inclination to opportunism as against utilization of opportunity. In the words of Khalil Gibran of Lebanon, pity the nation that is full of beliefs and empty of religion. Pity the nation that wears a cloth it does not weave, eats a bread it does not harvest, and drinks a wine that flows not from its own wine press. Pity the nation that acclaims the bully as hero and that deems the glittering conqueror bountiful. Pity the nation whose statesman is a fox, whose philosopher is a juggler, and whose art is the art of patching and mimicking. Pity the nation divided into fragments, each fragment deeming itself a nation. This consummate patriot concluded, if Lebanon was not my country, I would have chosen it to be my country. Are there Nigerians willing to rise and accept responsibility for making this nation great in our own lifetime? If these words are anything to go by, then the process of national rebirth must begin with the creation of a new national value system, which entails a reversal of all the elements of our past and present negative value configuration. To obtain the buy-in of the people, the value reorientation drive must be productized in the perception of the people. An association must be created between the new national value system and the components of good governance, which Nigerians sometimes refer to as the dividends of democracy. This necessitates structural reconfiguration. Now, number 2, structural reconfiguration. Central to the delivery of public goods is the devolution of powers. Political power is the vehicle through which economic value is allocated. Therefore, power must be devolved to the levels of government that are closest to the people and that can best deliver public goods. Political power must then be used to facilitate development of clusters. Clusterization arises from the need to factor into the value creation process the cultural, geoeconomic, and biogeographical peculiarities of the various subnational entities, as well as the need to create competitive economies of scale. Just look at the golden years of the regions. Look at what they did with cocoa. Look at what they did with pyramids of granite. Look at what they did with palm oil. Look at what they did with rubber. This necessitates the formation of zonal or regional structures. The zonal blocks will become distributors of governance, channeling good governance to states, which will act as wholesalers. Local governments functioning as retailers of governance will deliver public goods directly to the grassroots. Throughout the distribution channel, the objective is to ensure that each public good delivered fulfills the value proposition as defined by the new national identity. Therefore, by ensuring the efficient and effective delivery of public goods, the value proposition is fulfilled, the new national identity is effectively communicated, and brand integrity is maintained. The new national value system, combined with the new structural configuration, will produce a new kind of nation, the cutting-edge nation. The cutting-edge nation is nimble in structure and proximal in impact. It is knowledge-driven. No idiot can sit on that seat anymore. It's knowledge-driven and wisdom-governed. It is service-oriented and global in outlook. What do I mean by global? That's joining two words, global and local, together. Global in outlook. Such nations are characterized by strong and efficient local governments capable of maximizing local resources to create vibrant local economies that have global impact. The cutting-edge nation recognizes that the people are simultaneously, say with me, simultaneously. I can't hear you. The people are simultaneously board members and customers. You think that cannot happen? Mr. Wema, are there board members of your bank that are not customers of your bank? No. To patronize your own, citizens must become board members and at the same time customers. As board members, they occupy the highly esteemed office of the citizen. It's higher than that of the president, because sovereignty lies in the people. They occupy the highly esteemed office of the citizen and contribute to the national economy through innovation and enterprise, and to national governance through election, protestation, and the power of recall. To facilitate the economic stakeholdership of the people, the government creates an economic system that is value-driven rather than currency-driven, where ideas thrive through innovative financing so that no value-creating idea is allowed to die over shortage of funds. Banks today don't lend money anymore. Many of them just do round tripping with foreign exchange. Economic stakeholdership, thus created, facilitates political participation. As customers, the people are the beneficiaries of good governance. Hence, to meet their needs, the government creates an enabling environment for efficient service delivery. Institutionalization. Number 3. To institutionalize the cutting-edge nation principle, the first step will be to ensure that every cadre of leadership is manned by competent persons who embody the new national value system. And I believe the best of the best can be gotten from the north and the south to steer the affairs of this nation. This necessitates minimizing the perks of office and emphasizing the responsibilities. Cut down their salaries minimally. Because if you're not full, you cannot feed others. Don't go there to enrich yourself. Go there to serve your nation. Like JFK said, don't ask what will my country do for me. Ask what can I do for my country. George Washington became president of Nigeria, of America, and he said, other than money for staplers and papers and everything I will need to run this office, I will take no salary. Today, we do not only take salaries. The security fund will make them billionaires overnight that they do not account for. I believe that is criminal. It also calls for a competitive public revenue system that progressively eliminates the allocation principle, which only creates lazy and dependent administrative units. Instead, subnational units in the new era will be self-sustaining, generating revenue internally. Federal government on its part will support the subnational efforts and reward subnational productivity through competitive incentivization. Within this competitive system, subnational leaders such as governors and local government chairpersons we compel to create innovative systems and strategies, while the people will readily vote out or recall poorly performing leaders and representatives. You don't have to wait for 4 years before you cry out if a government is not doing what is in your interest. However, to guarantee that no Nigerian in any part of the country is subjected below an irreducible minimum standard of living, agreed upon by all, the federal government will create inclusive intervention policies for such a system to thrive. A new constitutional order is necessary. And I'm going to rest my case today on this new constitution. Creating a new constitutional order. Those who claim that the current constitution is sufficient as a national ground norm fail to recognize the aberrations which the constitution itself represents, or the import of these aberrations on a national psyche of value system. Contrary to his claim that we the people gave ourselves a constitution, the 1999 constitution was designed without the participation of the Nigerian people. This non-inclusion of a people in a process by which they supposedly resolve to give themselves a constitution is unrivaled in the history of political falsehood, thereby laying the foundation for a culture of political fraudulence. It was also a lost opportunity for a pre-transition learning experience in democratization. An ideal preparation for a re-entry into the democratic era after years of democratic desensitization under military dictatorship will have been for the people to decide the frameworks by which they will be governed prior to choosing those who will govern them. Instead, according to an insider report by a former director at the presidency, Mr. Eric Teniola, the committee that produced the 1999 Constitution visited just few states, stayed most of the time in Abuja, held public hearings, just for a few days, compiled his report and submitted, doubting that the government of the day would even approve it. It was so shoddily put together that a clean copy of the Constitution was not even ready until after Obasanjo and the governors were sworn in. Can anything be more perfidious than for leaders to take oaths to govern a nation by a constitution prepared under such circumstances and whose content they had hardly imbibed? It was John Adams who observed that the only foundation of a free constitution is pure virtue. The absence of virtue in the 1999 Constitution is a fundamental flaw in the current framework of the Nigerian state. Little wonder the shoddily prepared Constitution is fraught with inconsistencies and ambiguities which I do not have time to enumerate. The many breaches to which the Constitution has been subjected are an indication that constitutional conventions are already evolving in unconstitutional directions. The sooner we channel this discontent constructively towards constitutional rebirth, the better for us. Ignoring it is risking a revolution. Now to Mr. President, preempting the legacy of President Buhari. It's obvious to all that there's a new sheriff in town. Can I hear amen? Amen. I'm so excited about that. Can I hear a bigger amen? Amen. It's obvious to all that there's a new sheriff in town, and this is not an era of business as usual. Now, all that is required to give Nigeria a national rebirth is the political will of a president who enjoys a great deal of respect from the Nigerian people, including those who do not support him. The president may exercise this political will by creating a novel institution, a Presidential Commission for National Reconciliation, Reintegration, and Restructuring, comprising of a team of highly respected national influencers of high moral standing and unquestionable integrity and having bridge building antecedents. This commission should be mandated to work closely with stakeholders and power blocks as well as legislative houses to create a new national identity for the Nigerian people, promote forgiveness and reconciliation among contentious interest groups in Nigeria, foster the integration of the diverse sectional groups in Nigeria into true nationhood, facilitate the creation of an acceptable functional governmental structure for Nigeria, and midwife a process of constitutional rebirth that will culminate in a referendum by which the people will adopt a new constitution. The report of the 2014 National Conference, essential parts of that report, which is Nigerian Charter for National Reconciliation and Integration, will provide a ready-made operational springboard for this team. In a three-dimensional strategic arrangement, this national rebirth process can go on seamlessly alongside socio-economic development championed by the economic team of this administration, headed by the Vice President, as well as a national security and anti-corruption strategy spearheaded by the President and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. However, within the allowance provided by the current Constitution, until it is replaced, socio-economic development and national security strategies will be channeled in line with the cutting-edge nation philosophy from which the new constitution order will emerge. Very importantly, this process will also result in the adoption of a long-time, constitutionally backed national vision that will subsequently guarantee accurate succession as well as guide policy making for many generations, irrespective of the party in power. Partisan elections and leadership selection will then be based on determining which political party and which candidates have the best strategies to achieve the national vision. That is the pathway to the new Nigeria. On the occasion of my 60th birthday, I spoke to this new Nigeria. a nation built on the pillars of righteousness and peace, a land of freedom and of justice, a home of equity and fair play, where though creed and tongue may differ, the people will unite in the pursuit of a common national destiny. It's a dream that is rooted in God's plan and purpose for our nation, and whose fulfillment I desire to see in my lifetime, and I will see it. Like Abraham Lincoln, who laid the groundwork for the unification of the United States of America by winning the war against the forces of disintegration and championing the Emancipation Proclamation, President Buhari has the opportunity to leave a legacy of a new Nigeria. I pray he gets the priorities and strategies right in Jesus' mighty name. Amen. And the people said, Amen. Amen. Where do we begin? National rebirth can truly begin only when the sons and daughters of Zion take responsibility for our national destiny by tackling headlong the giants confronting our nation. First, the trajectory of the sons of Ishmael clearly reveals that exclusion and rejection are the harbingers of terror and violence. Like David who killed Goliath, and whose name means beloved, men and women of stature, both young and old, must arise in every sphere of our national life to uproot violence and terror through inclusion, propelled by love, rather than exclusion that produces rejection and annihilation. The Davids in governance must combat violence with inclusive policies motivated by service rather than exclusive politics driven by self. Like Abishai, whose name means gift from God, who killed Ishbi-Benob, the giant of corruption, sons of God must begin to manifest their God-given gifts in their respective sectors of influence as good stewards of the manifold grace of God, so as to deliver the nation from the bondage of corruption. Like Elhanan, whose name means God is good and gracious, who slew Lami, the giant of commerce, a new breed of entrepreneurs must arise with new models of commerce and enterprise that will spread the goodness and graciousness of God through innovative problem-solving strategies that facilitate wealth redistribution. Like Sibekai, whose name means the Lord intervenes, who killed Sipai, the giant of injustice. The saints of God must accept the honor of executing the judgment that is written. Crusaders of justice must stand to defend the poor and the fatherless, to do justice to the afflicted and the needy, deliver the poor and needy, and free them from the hand of the wicked. Finally, like Jonathan, whose name means God has given, who killed 6-digited man of great stature, sons and daughters must arise from Zion in the name of the Lord, who is our judge, the Lord who is our lawgiver, and the Lord who is our king, to set and enforce standards in every sphere of our national endeavor, and to eliminate the spirit of lawlessness. For out of Zion shall go forth the law, as is written in Isaiah 2, verses 2 and 3. Therefore, with faith in God, who determined the times and boundaries of nations from the beginning, let us all rise to give our President Muhammadu Buhari, the needed support in the making of a new Nigeria, doing so with the assurance that God who ordained our national destiny is greater than all of our challenges put together. In the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, in my lifetime, Nigeria will be saved. Amen. Nigeria will be changed. Amen. And Nigeria will be great. Amen. Thank you. God bless you. And God bless Nigeria.